Ladies and gentlemen, Sui Ishida, one of my favorite manga authors of all time, unexpectedly dropped his new work this week, and I was blown away with just how well done it ended up being. Ishida's previous work, Tokyo Ghoul, was one that I covered a lot on this channel, and I covered it right up until the end of Ri's manga, as well as the end of Ri's anime, and so we've definitely been here on the Sui Ishida train for a long time. And for a good reason. With how well built the characters, the story, just how believable the motivations were in Tokyo Ghoul, I couldn't help but be engrossed in the incredible world they ended up creating. Sui Ishida's fourth work had a lot to live up to because of this. And I believe Choujin X somehow manages to have a chapter 1 that not only captures the interest of the reader, but also engrosses you in theorizing about the world itself from chapter 1. And so let's go take a deep dive into what makes Choujin X, this new series by Sui Ishida, something truly special. The opening of the series starts with a dark scene of an introduction to our main threat. A Choujin that seems to use a power referred to as a flame later, commits a terrorist act and causes a plane to unexpectedly crash. Something strange about this is we get to know the motivations of one of the girls on the plane, and she ends up being burned alive at the end of the crash as well. If you actually look back at Sui Ishida's Twitter from late 2020, he seems to have created an art already of the protagonist, Tokyo, which we'll talk about here in a second, and this girl together. And so it seems like this attack is used to introduce us to characters that will be a part of the greater world later on. And it also introduces just how much of a threat these Choujin being just a part of society ends up being. Because it's the equivalent of having a weapon in your back pocket that no one could ever find from a metal detector that could just instantly destroy and capsize half a city. Very intimidating for sure, and it really shows that power in it. Toward the end of the girl's story, she ends up getting burned alive, and I ended up getting very, very strong Fire Punch vibes. This girl, whose name we now know is Ellie from the Twitter post that Ishida had posted before, ends up getting attacked and burned. There's a very tragic feeling to seeing Ellie get attacked, and honestly, it kind of hits in a very sour way. It hurts. And I really hope that Ellie as a character doesn't end up meeting similar fates to what Agni ends up meeting inside Fire Punch. I think that she seems to be very peppy and very passionate and driven, and so it is very possible for a world that immediately sends her into a terrorist attack to tear her down very easily. We'll see how she ends up developing. Next, after this scene that introduced us to Choujins, we move on to our actual protagonists. Azuma Higashi, a hot-blooded youth that identifies with a lion, almost immediately breaks a man's arms in two, like a cool guy, creating a very interesting introduction to the character. And Tokyo Kurahara, his friend, he's plain. If anything, I'd say his most outstanding feature off the bat is his willingness to rely on his friends. Kaneki would never. He immediately calls on Azuma to help him save a girl, but he's the one that notices the girl being attacked in the first place. Standing alongside him and smiling when Azuma refers to him as his partner and just taking the credit alongside Azuma for saving the girl, he seems to really embody taking credit, which is similar to what the bird that he identifies with ends up doing, stealing prey of others, the vulture. Off the bat, the characters seem to have relationships with genuine depth to them. Azuma seems like the kind of character that stands in the front and doesn't really have anything he truly wants to pursue for himself. At one point, he mentions a Choujin being close to roly-polies, which just keep moving until they can find a new damp place to live in. It makes me wonder if he identifies with it too, and if he's trying to seek out some sort of meaning in chasing after Choujins himself. Since Tokyo seems to be almost what his moral compass is as he's deciding to go and get into situations. Tokyo, has a depth to him beneath the surface that makes me wonder about his true intentions. He seems to not have a lot of power behind his mindset and mostly acts on the justice that he perceives at first glance. He sees a girl being catcalled in the street and goes, "She's obviously in trouble," and still takes that moment to ask someone else that he believes actually has the power to help, Azuma, to do it for him. It's this odd sort of symbiotic relationship where if they gain the ability to be capable on their own and competent, they'd end up losing each other because they rely on each other so much for it. And Tokyo really seems to understand this. Next up, I'm going to talk about the setting a little bit. After saving the girl from the trouble that she was in, the two boys overlook a destroyed city that shows clear signs that Choujin have been a problem for a while. Something even more interesting than that is the city seems to be made of various different kinds of destruction. Like, disasters like plane crashes must be commonplace. Here's some examples of what stands out from the panel that we see. There's a building blown open with what seems to be a giant circular laser aimed to the horizon. There's buildings crooked and collapsing all around the area as if a natural disaster had hit them, like an earthquake. And there's a smokestack in the corner of the panel that seems to get its own entire separate panel that seems to match the aflamed Choujin's power from on the airplane. These all seem to be indicators of potential antagonists that could come in the future, and the smokestack especially really makes my brain tingle a little bit. All of these seem to very clearly try to tell a story to the viewer, and those willing to give a discerning eye to the different scenery are given the extra reward of being able to observe the worlds more in depth, which is really, really well done. I'd honestly say this style of world building is great because it embodies that principle of show, don't tell, and allows readers to kind of pick up context clues and build their own narrative around it, which is really good for a series that won't be serialized week to week. And I genuinely think that this world off the bat has more development than the 23 wards of Tokyo Ghoul ever did. It's kind of funny because like the Yamato prefecture that they're trying to describe the series taking place in is described as incredibly ordinary, even though when you look at the scenery itself, it feels anything but that. But just those small signs, like it's anything but that. It's really well done. I definitely enjoy the setting they're setting up here, and I think that there could be a lot of intrigue in what they're building. But after reflecting on that scenery, our protagonists decide to volunteer to help out at the crashed plane that was attacked by a flame Choujin just a little while ago. However, there seems to be something very weird about it. Despite this plane crashing, apparently 200 people survived the attack, and we saw the cabin go completely up in flames, burning through like people's faces and their entire bodies. And we start to get suspicious as a viewer, but the protagonists don't even understand what happened. So while this seems suspicious to us, we don't get to see any of the victims before flashing forward to our protagonists beginning to get attacked on the way home by the guy that Azuma broke the arms of earlier inside the chapter. Apparently the random jobber man who had his arms broken was given a random drug by a man in lipstick, and now he can stretch Armstrong like Mr. Fantastic, and he wants some sweet revenge on that random high school kid. Cause you know, that's what we do. This Mohawk man himself seems to be on cloud 9 after taking this drug, so it seems like there's some sort of euphoria associated with becoming a Choujin, or maybe it enhances the emotion you were feeling at the time of taking the drug itself. And so, if that were the case, that would mean that the aflamed Choujin's anger showed earlier was enhanced. And that's really interesting to me. If that is the case, it reminds me very closely of the Frenzied Frogs from Jigan, another manga which I suggest giving a look. It's very good and has that like seinen vibes to it. But it means that the character's motivations will be very heavily tied to the powers each character uses in that case. So if someone's power is fire and their emotion they had amplified is anger, that would mean they are someone you don't want to piss off much. Or if someone identifies with being a bird, a vulture of sorts, and is very envious of his friend. It's possible he may become that friend. But we'll see that a little bit later on. It's interesting. Unfortunately, our protagonists get completely bodied by Drug Chicken Man and end up on the side of a river where Azuma ends up pointing to the extra syringes they grabbed from their enemies earlier and considers using it for himself. As they consider using these drugs, Azuma and Tokyo reflect on their past together, and I think something very key about their relationship is established. Tokyo was told by his sister that he has to pay back anyone who helps him regardless of the situation. Azuma was told by his dad to shirk justice is cowardice. Each of their rules that they've been taught by their role models are missing something. Tokyo can't always pay back those who help him because he doesn't have the power to do so. Azuma doesn't have the ability to discern for himself what justice is, and so he simply rolls behind Tokyo to have a code to stand behind, since he has a strong sense of moral compass. They seem to rely on each other to support their shortcomings, and stay stuck in those flaws. Tokyo himself seems to realize this, and he grabs the syringe for himself and acknowledges that he's been thinking that this whole time. If Azuma actually had the thing he was missing, he wouldn't be able to stay by his side. If I don't do anything right now, I won't be able to stay friends with you, he says, as if he'd be outgrown and stuck in his powerlessness. A transformation begins on the next pages, and very quickly Tokyo seems to turn into a dark figure. His face is clouded in darkness, he sprouts claws on his hands as well. And then we get the first look at the Choujin that will be leading our story. LeaIsChill Choujin, Tokyo Kurihara. But Azuma remains on the ground, Tokyo standing in his place to take the credit. After finishing the chapter, I felt a whole lot of thoughts and feelings revolving around what the story could be in the future. I thought of two separate theories about what could have happened here. One, where the bird on the front cover is Azuma in Tokyo's head, and the Choujin is their consciousness, combined together into the LeaIsChill Choujin form. That would mean that Azuma is the one fighting in his body, but Tokyo is the one taking all the credit. Like a vulture would steal prey from a lion. The other way is Tokyo betraying his friend and deciding not to jab him, letting him balance the power so that they both held so they can be on more even ground, which I don't think is fitting for the characters. I don't think Tokyo would abandon Azuma like that. But either way, it seems like the bonds between these characters is really going to influence where the powers come from, and I'm all for it. If Tokyo was envious of Azuma, I could very easily see their power adjusting so that they could make up for each other's flaws, which is really cool. I definitely think a power system like this Choujin, if it is associated with the actual mental health and like the mental toll that you're currently taking on, is a much more interesting power system than Kagune's for sure versus Tokyo Ghoul. All in all, I think Choujin X embodies an incredibly paced beginning to a story that has so many small details built into it that it's very easy to reread the chapter and notice something new. We've gotten confirmation that Sui Ishida will only be creating chapters in his off time, and so it's very possible there will be more than month-long gaps between chapters. And that will allow us to theorize and like look at the details that he adds to these chapters and the extra little bit of influence between. I really loved being able to theorize about Tokyo Ghoul, and so being able to have a semi-irregular series to discuss that has such powerful imagery, I think definitely makes me feel inspired. I'm really looking forward to it. And so I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how Choujin X ends up developing as the story continues to progress. And I look forward to discussing the future of the series and seeing if any of these predictions that I've made in this video will end up coming true. Because definitely there is a lot I tossed out. But let me know if you guys enjoyed Choujin X. I think that it was a stronger chapter than the first chapter of Tokyo Ghoul even. It helps that it's 73 pages, or 83 or whatever it is. But I'm definitely very happy that it ended up getting released, and I'm looking forward to seeing how things work out. For now, thank you guys for watching. Be sure to hit that like button, and let me know what you think of Choujin X. What do you think about my theories? Do you think that envy that Tokyo has is going to end up being a large part of his character? Either way, let me know. I'll see you guys next time, and bye for now.